Hey guys, Prowl 1701 here, and today we're going to be ranking every season from 70s Doctor Who from worst to best. So, season 7 through season 17, as we do have to remember Tom Baker's final season is an 80s season. Before we get started, I have to say, every single season in 70s Doctor Who is amazing. I mean, not just good, not just great, amazing. I love them all to one degree or another. 70s Doctor Who is my favorite decade of Doctor Who. It's the golden age of Doctor Who. And when I was ranking Doctor Who by decade recently, 70s Doctor Who was number one, because you have two great doctors, you have some of the best companions the show's ever had. None of the companions are really bad, actually. You have two sets of the greatest producers and script editors the show's ever had, and then you have some of the best stories ever written for Doctor Who. Even the season that's in last place, and it was really hard to put one in last place, is still a fantastic season. Not just good, not just great, fantastic season. Every single season is at least B tier for me. If we're going like S tier, A tier, B tier, C tier, at least B tier. As a matter of fact, I might rank them all A tier. I love 70s Doctor Who. So with that in mind, we have 11 seasons, and we're going to get started at the bottom. In 11th place is Season 9. And again, I like Season 9. Got it right over here. Starts off really strong with Day of the Daleks. I love me some Day of the Daleks. It's one of my favorite Dalek stories. I especially love the special edition with the redone Dalek voices and the upgraded special effects. Now, we actually have laser blasts now. It really makes the execution of the story live up to the story itself, because I absolutely think it's a fantastically written story and the way it deals with time travel and paradoxes is fascinating. And I feel like it came out at a time when that kind of time travel story wasn't done like it is now, where it's a little more common. Really good story. I enjoy Curse of Peladon. I think it's a good story. It's not like top tier Pertwee, but I think it's really good. It's great to see David Troughton. It's nice to see John not stuck on Earth and out traveling a little bit. We have the Sea Devils, which is fantastic. One of Pertwee's definitely higher end stories. Delgado is great in it as the Master. I love the Sea Devil design. I love the location work. I love how they incorporated the Navy into it. It's a really good story. Now, the Mutants I've only seen once, and I liked it on first viewing. I could see myself not being as fond of it on repeat viewings, because part of what kept me engaged with it was constantly wondering what was going to happen next, especially going into part 4, because I'm like, it feels like it should just be a 4-parter. How are they going to keep this going? And the way they did actually worked. So one of the reasons I liked it as much as I did was because it was the first viewing of it. I don't know how it'll hold up on repeat viewings, but I did enjoy it. I liked some of the messages going on in it, some of the political messages in it, and I really enjoyed the mutant creature design a lot as well. It's an underrated story. Same thing for the Time Monster. The Time Monster, I think, looks really good. The restoration work on the Blu-ray is amazing. It's, again, great. It's always good to see Delgado. It's always good to see Delgado. Ingrid Pitt is stunning in this. I mean, just her performance and the way she looks is stunning in this. And I like it. It's cool seeing Atlantis. I like the King of Atlantis. I really liked him. I wish we'd got more of him. I love when the Master tries to hypnotize him and he's just like, I really like him. Yeah, it might be a little long. It's 6 parts, but it's got a lot of neat, interesting ideas going on it. Plus, I get to see some Terry Walsh in it, one of the unsung heroes of Doctor Who. I remember watching it for the first time when the box set came out, and I saw the guy on the ladder by the window. I'm like, that's Terry Walsh! I always like when I get to see Terry. So, yeah, I like Season 9. It just happens to be my least favorite because it's such a good decade for Doctor Who. Next on the list, in 10th place, is Season 8. It was really hard to do this list, by the way. Season 8 is kind of the most Pertwee story. It's like the Pertweeest Pertwee story to ever Pertwee. You pretty much have everything you associate with the Pertwee era in this. This is probably the Unit season where Unit's in it the most. The Doctor mostly on Earth except for Colony. The Master in every story. Joe is introduced, and that's kind of the definitive third Doctor companion. Really good stories. I like Terror of the Autons. It is a little bit of retread of Spearhead from Space, but it's a great introduction to the Master. It's a great introduction to Joe. I love Mind of Evil. I've talked about that before. The restoration work is not the best on it, but it's probably the best they could do. The Babel Color episode 1 is probably the best looking of the bunch. But it's a miracle we have this in color and all. The story I love. I love the consequences of the stuff he's dealt with Inferno being kind of important to this story. The Doctor's weakness, why he's so scared of fire. It's a really, really good story. Fills out its 6 parts really well. Claws of Axos is probably my least favorite Pertwee story, but it's got elements I like in it, and it's still perfectly watchable. Colony in Space is the nice story that kind of switches it up for the season, taking the Doctor off planet. I think it's well paced at 6 parts. I know that's not a popular opinion. I think it is. I love how the Master doesn't show up till halfway through. I love how some of the important parts of the story doesn't really start happening until about halfway through. It's a nice little change of pace when the first 3 parts are more about the colonists and the miners butting heads. I think it's cast really well, and I think everybody does a good job with their parts. The guy playing Ash is fantastic. And it's nice to see Pertwee off-world. It gives it a little change of pace for the season. And then the Daemons is good. I always maintain the Daemons is a little overrated, but it is good. It's nice to see the unit family getting a lot to do in this one. Benton and Yates getting a lot to do. The Brigadier, the Doctor getting to say reverse the polarity. Joe has some nice moments. She also has some frustrating moments. The location work is stunning. It's directed by Christopher Barry, who is one of the Doctor Who greats. Other than the ending being a bit disappointing, I think it's a really good story. Yeah, this one just happens to be a situation of the other seasons that we haven't talked about yet. I happen to like a little more. Season 8 is a fantastic season and always a great watch. And up next is Season 11, Pertwee's final story. Again, good season. Now that I've finally seen all of it, I really enjoy it. Planet of the Spiders is a little disappointing. It's fine. I enjoy the chase stuff in it. Pertwee gets some really good standout moments in it. I tend to love the Pertwee-Sarah Jane dynamic just in general. I think they're really good together. A tad long at 6 parts. The spiders don't always look the best, but it's classic Who, that's fine. It's easily the best spider story Doctor Who's ever done. Way better than anything in the modern series. But I still find it a little disappointing. Monsters of Peladon is good. It's a bit of a retread of Curse, but I still like it. I think it runs a little long at 6 parts, but Donald G, whatever his name is, the guy playing the engineer, he's good in it. The woman playing the Queen of Peladon, she's fine in it. And then Sarah Jane is great. This is one of the best written stories Sarah Jane has in Classic Who. I love how fully developed she is and how independent she is. And when she's having a fit about having to get on her knees and they're making her sound subservient to the Doctor, she's like, I am not. I love that. Monsters is still a fun watch. I've only watched it the one time, but I did really enjoy it. And then I felt sad when Agador died. I did not like that. The Invasion of Time, not the Invasion of Time, the Time Warrior. The Time Warrior is fantastic. That could be my favorite story of the season. I think it's great. It's a wonderful introduction to the Sontarans. It's a wonderful introduction to Sarah Jane. It is John Pertwee's one historical story, and I wish he'd gotten more. And it's great, and it's written by Bob Holmes, and I absolutely love it. It's still my favorite Sontaran story. It's still my favorite Sontaran performance. And I love the guy playing the other bad guy, the human villain. I forget his name. He's great. I really like him. And even his kind of second in the command, who's kind of dim-witted, I like him too. So many good things going on in the Time Warrior. Invasion of the Dinosaurs. Excellent story. Great twist with one of our regulars that you don't see coming. The spaceship stuff's a little silly, but I can overlook that. And then, of course, some of the dinosaur effects. Some of the dinosaur effects hold up very badly. Even, I think, at the time, very badly. Some of the dinosaur effects work well. Let's be honest, the T-Rex looks terrible. The rest of it's not bad, the T-Rex looks terrible. But the story is really good, and John gets some humorous moments. I love when they're taking his mugshot and he smiles. That's funny. What was the other one? I'm forgetting. Death to the Daleks, which of course you guys know I love Death to the Daleks. Highly underrated story. If you're not sure, go look up any video where I talk about Frank the Dalek. You guys know I love Death to the Daleks. And And next on the list is season 14, one of the two most overrated seasons in all of classic Doctor Who, the other being season 5. Now, both of those are good seasons, but I think they're vastly overrated. Season 14, I know it's part of the Hinchcliffe era, which is amazing, but I find season 14 more and more to be my least favorite Tom season. It's very inconsistent to me. I mean, it only has one real masterpiece in it, which of course is Talons. Talons is amazing. Talons is one of the best Doctor Who stories ever made. It's fantastic. It deserves all of the accolades it's gotten over, the over 40 years since it's been made. It's a fantastic story with some great location work. And the cast does a good job with their roles. I really love Talons. And then it also has the underrated Face of Evil. I love Face of Evil. It's easily my second favorite story of the season. And I feel like it doesn't get enough credit. It's really good. It's a great introduction to Leela. I think it's got some pretty good set design, especially the jungle she lives in. It's not perfect. I don't really like the character designs for the creatures who live in the mountain. They look weird. And then the actual face carved into the mountain looks a little weird. But Tom gets some really good dialogue in it. And the special effects in it look really good. Like when we see the computer's face, which is Tom's face, is really, really impressive. Very underrated story. And then we also have Mask of Mandragora, which I consider to be underrated. I really enjoy this one. It does have that abrupt ending that feels too easy, much like the Daemons. And I will definitely criticize it for that it ends a little too easily and it's a little too wrapped up too neatly, too quickly. But up until then, I think it's really good. Some of the location work looks fantastic. I kept expecting to see Patrick McGoohan jump out somewhere. I also think the casting is really good. I like the guy playing the Count a lot. His villainy comes across well. And then the guy playing the Prince, who's kind of the other good guy, does a really good job as well. I still love when the Doctor's like, "You can't count, Count." That could be one of my favorite lines in all of Doctor Who. "You can't count, Count." I love that. Very underrated story. And then we have The Hand of Evil, which has 3 great episodes, but let's be honest, it falls apart in episode 4, aside from the actual companion departure. The companion departure when Sarah Jane leaves is fantastic. One of the best, actually. But most of episode 4 falls apart. Stephen Thorne doesn't quite work as the male Eldrad for me. I much preferred the female Eldrad. I thought she was better. The first 3 episodes are pretty good, although it does fall into that trope of hypnotizing Sarah, which the previous story had just done. I really feel like season 14 treats Sarah as a much more two-dimensional cardboard cutout character than she had been treated previously, especially early in her run, which is a little disappointing. But I still find Hand of Fear to be, the first 3 parts to be really good. Then we move into the 2 most overrated stories in all of Classic Who. And that's the problem with season 14. It has not just one, but both of these stories in Classic Doctor Who that I find to be the most overrated. Robots of Death and The Deadly Assassin. The reason I like Robots of Death is not the story. I've talked about this at length before. I love the robot design and I love the set designs. The set designs are fantastic, very different from something in Classic Who. For what's supposed to be like a Nostromo worker ship, instead it almost looks like a luxury cruiser with splendor, like the Titanic or the Olympic or something. And then I love the robot design. That robot design holds up better than any other robot design I think in classic Doctor Who. It looks phenomenal. Those are the things that endear the story to me, or endear Robots of Death to me, I should say, as the actual story doesn't really do much for me, to be honest. And then The Deadly Assassin, which taken on its own in a bubble is fine. But what it does to the lore as a whole is bothersome, and it ruins the Time Lords. As much as I love Bob Holmes, I feel like it ruined the Time Lords, and they've never been the same since. This is where they go from being more godlike to just being old men bickering and shouting and arguing and talking about their hips and politics, and both of them overrated. And that is one of the reasons why season 14 is not higher. And the season would be at the bottom if it didn't have Face of Evil and Talons carrying it. They really carry the season for me. And next on the list is season 15. It's really hard to rank the Williams era sometimes. Season 15 is a little bit of a mixed bag. You start off strong with Horror of Fang Rock, which is easily the best story of the season. I'm pretty sure Ham would have my back on that one. The best story of the season. I love Horror of Fang Rock. It is a classic. Easily one of the best Fourth Doctor stories outside of the Hinchcliffe era. One of the best Fourth Doctor stories, period, really. A lot of fun with that one. And then we move into The Invisible Enemy, which is kind of meh to me. I think it's more famous as an introduction to K9 than anything else, although the guy playing the inventor of K9, he's great too. I liked him in it. But overall, it's just kind of meh for me. Image of the Fendal, I remember liking. I haven't watched it in a long time. I've only seen it like once. It actually really needs a rewatch. But I remember liking it, except for the Fendal's final form I wasn't really keen on. Sunmakers I love. It's a great story. I love getting a nice Robert Holmes non-horror story. It's very obvious he was upset with his tax man. I think it's really good. I always enjoy a rewatch of it. Underworld is underrated. Really, the only problem Underworld has is the bad CSO. It has some of the best model work in all of Doctor Who. And it's a four-parter that knows it only needs to be a four-parter, which I like. Yeah, Underworld is actually just very underrated. It's better in its reputation. For me, the weak point is Invasion of Time, where the budget very obviously ran out. It just drags. It's 6 parts. It drags. It has some nice moments, but the original effects look really rough on it, and it just drags too much. And I find myself not as invested in it. And those interior TARDIS scenes at the end, you know what I mean. Yeah, 15 is just... I love the fact that there are different types of episodes. You still have some of the horror episodes carrying over from the Hinchcliffe era, but there's also those episodes that do other stuff. So I like that we have a different, the tone of the season is different, and I do like that. Next on the list is Season 10. It's really hard for me to pick between 7 and 10. Sometimes 10 is my favorite, sometimes 7 is my favorite. That came out weird. But right now it's Season 10. So many good stories. I love The Three Doctors, my favorite multi-doctor story. Per usual, Troughton steals the show. Carnival of Monsters is a fantastic story that I think more casual fans aren't aware of, because I think a lot of times more casual fans that watch the modern series kind of catch the popular clip notes of Classic Who, and this is easily one they could miss. It's also, I believe, Ian Marter's first performance in Doctor Who, with him playing a different character besides Harry in this one. Great story. I love the Dressigs. The Dressigs are just a cool creature, and they're executed well. And it's a lot of fun, keeping you wondering what's going on throughout a lot of the story. And then I also like the aliens and how they have their own kind of manner of speak they do. I like when Doctor Who does that. Frontier in Space is good, but I don't like how it has the quick ending, because it has to wrap things up to lead into Planet of the Daleks. That's a little irksome. And it's a fantastic performance from Delgado. Sadly, his last performance in Doctor Who. But I wish his final scene had a little more of a better send-off, which isn't their fault. They didn't know. Planet of the Daleks is kind of the weak spot for me. It's my least favorite 70s Dalek story. One of my least favorite Dalek stories. It just doesn't quite live up to it. Although the cliffhanger to episode 1 is fantastic. And then The Green Death is just a classic. It's one of the best companion departures. It's got some fantastic special effects. It's got some not as great special effects, let's be honest, but a lot of the special effects, especially with the Magus, looks amazing. And it's got so many lessons, not just about pollution and toxic waste, but also about the dangers of AI, which are even more apparent now. Keeping in mind this predates the Terminator by over a decade, talking about the dangers of AI, which are a very real concern in 2023. So yeah, I love The Green Death. It's a classic. Just a good season, a nice variety of stories. It's nice seeing Jo Grant grow as a character over the course of her tenure, really coming to a head here at the end. Just a good season. And next on the list is Season 7. Season 7 is so good. It has one main thing holding it back, and that's called The Ambassadors of Death, which is too long. I actually like the story to Ambassadors of Death a lot, but it's too long in 7 parts. 4 or 5 parts tops. 7 parts is too much. Of course, I love Inferno. I did just rewatch Inferno recently. I actually got to watch the special edition of it for the first time with the enhanced restoration work. As one of my patrons, Colin Coney, had sent it to me for my birthday, which I really appreciate, Colin. And it was a great watch through. I always love rewatching Inferno, my favorite Pertwee story. And it really, it's definitely one of the reasons why season 7 tends to be my favorite Pertwee season. Silurians is good. I think it's a tad long, maybe a part too long. I think 6 parts would have worked a little better. But it has a lot going on in it with the Silurians, and of course with the plague that happens toward the end of the story, which feels way more relevant in a post-COVID world. But it's still some good performances. It just needs some restoration work like Ambassadors does for its Blu-ray release whenever we get it. And it has a nice moral gray area between the Silurians and Unit. You know, who's the good guys, who's the bad guys. You know, it's not, you know, one's the good, one's the bad. There's a really big gray area there, which I really like about it. And then, of course, Spearhead is fantastic. I got to see the Blu-ray version of Spearhead for the first time recently, and it looked gorgeous. And the story's phenomenal. I love the story of Spearhead. It's a great introduction to Pertwee's Doctor. It's a great introduction to this new era of Doctor Who, which is one of the best eras of Doctor Who. It's a great introduction to the best decade of Doctor Who. And it's a great introduction to Doctor Who being in color. There's just so many great things about Spearhead. A good season with a nice variety of stories, which I like, and a darker tone, I think, than the rest of the Pertwee era. And I think it feels tonally different than any other Pertwee season, which I like. And next on the list is season 16. Some people might be surprised. How could you put 16 above 7 and 10? Part of it's just the fact, as much as I love John Pertwee, I love Tom Baker. I love the Fourth Doctor. The Fourth Doctor is my Doctor. I love more of the Fourth Doctor. And aside from Power of Prowl, which as we know isn't very good, and despite what a couple of people say, it isn't very good. Let's just be honest and agree with me on this one. It's not very good. It's not very good, Ham. It's not very good. It still has a lot of fun stories. I actually really enjoy the Williams era. I like the camp. I like the humor. I love how witty Tom Baker is in this era. I love the Ribos operation, or Ribos, I'm never going to get that right, but you guys know that, and you know I love this story. I've raved about it before. I think Tom Baker is on fire this season, especially in this story. I love Mary Tam as Romana. Again, another fantastic companion. And I love when they first meet in the TARDIS. I love when they're first talking right when they get out of the TARDIS. I love the guy playing the Graf Vindicate. I love the guy playing the older, larger of the two con men. The guy playing the thinner one, I don't much care for. He's but the guy playing the older one, Ustav or whatever, he's great. I love him. He's fantastic. The guy playing Benro is good. And even the guy playing the kind of guard is good. The one with the mustache. He's good. You know, there's a lot of really good casting going on. I like the set design. The catacombs look really nice. And it has some good cliffhangers I like. I really just enjoy this one. Pirate Planet's amazing. One of my favorite Tom Baker stories, easy, especially outside of the Williams era, my favorite of the season. Douglas Adams has a clever script. Tom Baker gets some wonderful dialogue. I love Bruce playing the captain. Is he a little over the top? Yes, but I absolutely love the performance. Moons of Madness! Who doesn't love that? And even his costume design, it's a little classic Who campy looking, but it's pretty good considering the budget. Some of the special effects haven't aged the best. It does need updated effects. I'd love to see Pirate Planet get some updated effects. But the location work looks phenomenal, especially considering that's the surviving film elements. The film elements do survive. The location work looks really, really good. Stones of Blood is also good. I don't really care about the Earth stuff as much, but I love everything going on the hyperspace ship. And I know that's the opposite of how almost everyone else feels. I know. But I love it. I love the idea. Doctor Who doesn't really deal with hyperspace very often, actually. Matter of fact, this might be the only time I can think of it actually deals with acknowledging that hyperspace exists in the Doctor Who universe. So I would love to see that come back up. So I love the idea of a ship that's over, what's basically Stonehenge, but isn't Stonehenge. But it's just in this hyperspace dimension, so it's not actually there. It's there without being there. And I enjoy the guest cast a lot as well, except for the one guy who leads the cult who's overacting a bit. Other than that, everyone else is good. Androids of Tara, it depends on the watch through. Sometimes I really like it. Sometimes I'm a little disappointed with it. The location work looks good. I love Romana's outfit, that purple outfit. Tom has some nice, clever, witty lines here. The guy who played the pilot, Macrotera, is playing a good job in his villainous role here. I don't like that Romana feels kind of useless here. She just kind of is the damsel in distress character here. I really don't think it's good character development. She feels like she regresses as a character here. And she's like, she gets kidnapped, she gets rescued, she gets kidnapped, she gets rescued. But hats off to Mary Tamm for playing 4 different roles in this story. That's impressive. You already know how I feel about Crow. Let's just move on. And of course, the Armageddon Factor I think is very underrated. I think it's a pretty good season ender. Not Tom's best season ender. Matter of fact, probably his second worst after Invasion of Time, but it's still fun. I enjoy it. I think it's cast pretty well. It also needs some updated effects, but I think the story's fine. And I feel like The Key to Time ends on a nice note. I feel like it wraps up pretty well. I mean, not perfectly, because like he just got the key together, and then he spreads it apart again without letting the White Guardian fix things. That's a little weird, but other than that, pretty well. So yeah, I like season 16. It's interesting to see Doctor Who sort of do a seasonal arc. I mean, it's a loose arc. I mean, each story does kind of feel like its own individual thing, but it's nice to see it attempt, you know, here in the late 70s to do a seasonal arc. I think that's pretty impressive and ahead of its time. And next on the list is season 17. Let's be honest, I will definitely admit City of Death has a lot to do with this. I love City of Death. It's my favorite Doctor Who story. Again, wonderful location filming in Paris. It looks gorgeous. The banter between Lalla Ward and Tom Baker is some of the best banter ever between a Doctor and a companion. You can tell they're on a really high point in their relationship here. Both the actors and the characters. The story is phenomenal. Douglas Adams and Graham Williams have crafted a fantastic script, and Julian Glover is fantastic as the Count. The actress playing the Countess is fantastic. The guy playing Duggan is fantastic. Duggan would have made such a fun character. I do think it's kind of funny how he stops Scaldione just by punching him, but that's a very Duggan thing to do. Just punch him, and it works for the most important punch in history. I mean, I love everything going on with City of Death. My favorite scene in all of Doctor Who is from City of Death, of course, when the Countess is interrogating them. What a wonderful butler. He's so violent. Just, it's so witty and clever, and I love this story. I also really love Shada. I do consider Shada part of the season. I think it's written well. I think the animated segments blend in with the live-action segments really well. It doesn't feel overly long. I don't have the desire to watch it much because I've watched it like 6 times in the past 4 years, and that's plenty for a while. But it's a good story. Destiny of the Daleks is oddly enough one I enjoy. I don't know what it is about that one because it's not as good as some of the other Dalek stories. It definitely has a low production budget. But it has a strong rewatchability for me, and that means a lot. So it's one I tend to like going back to. I'm not even quite sure why, but I like it. It's strong rewatchability. Creature from the Pit, I liked. I've only watched it the one time, but I liked it. You guys know I love that one scene at the beginning of part 4 when Tom Baker's giving his speech and turning everybody against the lady, Astrostar, whatever her name is. That's really good. But I find the rest of it pretty good, too. It has some unfortunate moments with the creature design, but I think it's a nice story. It's a good 4-parter. Same thing with Nightmare of Eden. It's a good 4-parter, especially with the updated effects. The guy doing the German accent that's a little much. But overall, it's a good 4-parter, and I like the creatures in it. I like their costume design. I think it looks pretty good. So yeah, that's where we are with season 17. And in the number 2 spot, season 12, Tom Baker's first season in the role. Is it any surprise this was the first season released in the collection range? It's a perfect way to start. It's a fantastic season in its own right. It's Tom Baker's first season. Arguably the most iconic Doctor of not only classic Who, but of all of Doctor Who. With that fantastic scarf, fedora, and grin. That's all teeth. And then all of the stories are good. I like Robot. I'm not saying it's objectively the best post-regeneration story. It isn't, but it is my personal favorite. It's a lot of fun. It was a great way to ease people into this new era of Doctor Who, making it basically a Pertwee story post-Pertwee, much like how the Invasion was a Pertwee story pre-Pertwee. And it does a good job of that, plus giving us kind of one last major hoorah with the Brigadier and Benton and all them before Harry and Sarah and the Doctor go off on their own adventures. Then we have the Ark in Space, which is just a stone cold classic. I love the Ark in Space. Essential Doctor Who viewing. It's Alien before Alien, and it's done well. Even with the limited budget, I think it pulls itself off magnificently. And then the actor playing Noah and the actress playing Vira, I think, are both very good in their roles. Suntaran Experiment it's a good two-parter. It's a two-parter that knows it only needs to be a two-parter. I think if it was a four-parter, I'd get bored with it. But as a two-parter, it does its job well, and it's nice location work. I wish it had been shot on film instead of the videotape that they used for it, but it's a great location shoot. Genesis is Genesis. It's just a flat-out classic. It's essential Doctor Who viewing for any Doctor Who fan, and one of the best Dalek stories ever made, even if the Daleks aren't really in it a lot. It's the threat of the Daleks that makes this story work. Well, that and Davros and Knight are just being amazing, but the threat, the looming threat of the Daleks really makes this story work. Plus some good performances, including the Doctor's Do I Have the Right speech. And then Revenge of the Cybermen is underrated. It's a very good story. Possibly the most underrated classic Doctor Who story. Possibly the most underrated Doctor Who story. It's a lot of fun. It might not have the epicness of Earthshock, but it's a very similar story with a better Doctor and better companions. Really good story with some great location work down in the caves, I have to admit. And of course, the greatest season of the 70s. It has to be season 13, which needs to be on this shelf. I love me some season 13. Season 13 is just the best season Doctor Who's ever done, much less the 70s, but just in general. I love season 13. Just so many good stories. I mean, every single story this season is like A tier. I mean, if it's not S tier, it's A tier. So many classics, so many masterpieces. Every story this season, I think, is probably a classic. You have Terror of the Zygons, which, again, is a classic. It's one, I think, even people not familiar with classic Doctor Who have heard of it. They know it's a popular story. Planet of Evil, probably the one underrated story of the season. Still, I consider Planet of Evil a classic. I think it's a good story. I think it's got mostly good casting, a couple not so good casting, but mostly good casting. The set design is beautiful. That jungle design is one of the best, I think, sets in Doctor Who. And then the spaceship design I like a lot too. It's got a great creature. It's got a good story. It's got a nice Jekyll and Hyde thing going on. The guy playing that professor is fantastic, by the way, which I believe is the same guy who played the inventor of K9, if I remember correctly. He is doing well. So many good things going on in this story. Android Invasion might be the weakest of the season, but it's still strong. It's still a great story. A lot of good stuff going on into it. Again, some nice location work. Tom and Sarah both put in some good performances. The bit with the eye patch is a little weird, and why he wears the eye patch doesn't quite make sense. It has a couple flaws, and I wish Benton had a better send-off as a final episode. But it's good to see Benton and Harry again, though. And then just trying to figure out what's going on in the story really keeps you engaged in it as the Doctor and us as the audience puzzle out what's happening. Brain of Morbius, fantastic. It's very much Frankenstein, but again, good cast. The guy playing the Doctor working on Morbius is really, really good. I like him. I think in all of his Doctor Who appearances, I like him, whether it's the regular universe or the Peter Cushing universe. Another really good story, and again, really good set design. And then Pyramids of Mars is amazing. Pyramids of Mars is one of my favorite Doctor Who stories ever. It's in my top 10, possibly in my top 5. I love that story. We would be here all day talking about Pyramids of Mars. Sutekh is one of the best villains Doctor Who has ever had. It's probably the best one-off villain Doctor Who has ever had. And Gabriel Wolf, just the way he does the performance is amazing. The fact he keeps Sutekh talking in that whisper instead of more of a shout, it's kind of like the anti-version of Omega, and it's so effective. He really does a good job of communicating just how deadly Sutekh is. And so does Tom Baker in the dialogue when he's discussing Sutekh. You know, about, and Sarah J's like, more powerful even than your lot? Yes, even my lot. And then Tom and, or the Fourth Doctor and Sarah have some really amusing moments together too. Like when she's telling him, when she tosses him the thing, he's like, the slightest cough or sneeze could set this off. I wonder what happened to the person who built it. Maybe he sneezed. I love that. The guy playing, was it Professor Scarman? He's great. that guy puts in such a performance that with the makeup, he really does come across as a walking cadaver that's basically possessed. That's pulled off very well. The scene when he gets shot and the smoke just goes back in, considering it's a classic Who, it's so effective and it works so well. The cliffhanger when he kills the dude with the stick, so many good things about Pyramids of Mars. And then I love the fact that the only reason Sutekh loses is because of his overconfidence. The fact he lets the Doctor go, basically, and the Doctor is able to outsmart him. Such a good story. One of the most perfect stories in all of Doctor Who. And then, of course, The Seeds of Doom, which is a fantastic finale. Probably my second favorite Tom finale after Talons. It's really good. Has some The Thing vibes into it. Again, with a great cast. The guy playing Chase is good. The guy playing Scorby deserves an Oscar. And then, of course, the Doctor and Sarah are great in it. I love Seeds of Doom. It's just a phenomenal season. It really takes the gothic horror approach and it works well. It's nice that the season kind of has a theme to it and that it's all pulled off so well. And there's no duds in there. There's not even any stories in there that's just borderline good. Every single story is fantastic to one degree or another. And that's why season 13 is not only, I think, the best season of the 70s, it's also the best season Doctor Who has ever put out. Ever. So I want to know what you think. So comment down below and let me know how you would rank the seasons from the 70s from worst to best. Other things to do, don't forget to click the like button and the subscribe button. I am trying to reach 1,000 subscribers in 2023 and we are well on our way to that. So I certainly appreciate that if you enjoy my content. I also have a Patreon if you would like to support me that way. That does help keep the bills paid, especially lately. My entry-level tier is only $2 a month, so check that out. There's a link to that down in the description below. I want to give a shout-out to some of my top-tier patrons, Stephen Crane, Colin Coney, and Finn Perkins. I appreciate their support, as I do the support of all of my patrons. It does make a difference, and it's very much appreciated. I also have a P.O. box, if there's anything you would like to send me to look at and review, and a link to my Amazon wish list is down there as well. Don't forget to check out one of my other newer channels. Well, my other new channel I've just set up called Geek Speak Euphoria, where I talk about things like superhero stuff, video game stuff like that, if you're interested in hearing me talk about other things besides just sci-fi stuff. Most importantly, thank you for watching. Oh, Lance, while I have you here, I did get my Masterverse Faker in. I figured Lance would get a kick out of that. He likes Masterverse anyway. I do have my Masterverse Faker. Still got my Classics one here. Got my Classics Faker right here. I prefer my Classics Faker, I will admit. But I like the Masterverse one because it does have that more original look that the figure was supposed to have on the back of the original cardboard with the magenta strap and the glowing yellow eyes. I figured you'd get a kick out of it. And next on the list in 8th place is Season 14. One of the two seasons that are easily the most overrated seasons in all of Classic Who, with the other being Season 5. Season 14, I know it's part of the Hinchcliffe era, but I still think it's my least favorite Tom Baker season. I mean, it has one masterpiece, one underrated story, one decent story, two underrated stories, or two overrated stories. And then something else. I lost my train of thought there. Let's try that again. And next on the list is Season 14. Season 14 actually is my least favorite Tom Baker story. I know it's part of the Hinchcliffe era, but it's one of the two most overrated seasons. Not working, is it?